Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 734 offered by Ms. Jayapal of Washington, identifier H734-ANS-AM_013.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Ms. Miller, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment.
No, Madam, I'm sorry. Ms. Miller? No, okay. All right, go ahead, Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment renames this bill to be the Stigmatizing Vulnerable Children Act. And it does that because we need to be exactly clear about what this bill does and what the consequences of this bill would be. But first, I want to be clear about the facts about trans kids in sports. In 2004, the Olympics enacted its first policy letting transgender athletes compete in teams that align with their gender identity. In 2008, my home state of Washington became the first state to allow trans kids to compete in sports teams according to their gender identity. And I'm proud to share that after 15 years, Washington State has not had problems with this policy. In fact, Washington's success has encouraged at least 16 other states to enact similar policies affirming trans kids' participation in school sports. So it is simply not true, as my colleagues on the other side have asserted, that trans kids are somehow a product of so-called gender mills. And they exist, the trans kids exist in every district, red or blue, urban and rural. As a matter of fact, rural youth are as likely as urban youth to identify as LGBTQ. So what this bill really does is stigmatize vulnerable children. LGBTQ kids already face enormous challenges, and many trans kids suffer from lack of adequate services and supports. More than 75% of transgender students report experiencing harassment or discrimination in schools. Neglecting these harms follows them into adulthood, where 77% of transgender individuals grew up to have mental health issues. A survey found that more than half of transgender and non-binary youth have seriously considered suicide. Suicide. And 1 in 5 have attempted suicide. The Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics has clearly outlined the benefits of sports to young people. Still, these kids are afraid of participating because of the stigma that this bill reinforces. 71% of transgender youth and non-binary youth have reported experiencing discrimination solely because of their identity. 83% of trans kids are worried about even participating because, in part, due to this discrimination. So this proposal does nothing to address those very real harms that trans kids are dealing with. Instead, if enacted, trans kids would effectively be banned from joining a team and forced to give up their favorite sport under this bill. I've also heard a lot from my colleagues on the other side about the need to defend women. But there is a real hypocrisy here that should be named. The first markup of this committee's majority is during Women's History Month, but it does nothing for women experiencing actual harms. Here are real, measurable harms for women. Women make 82 cents of every dollar by men. When House Democrats advanced the Paycheck Fairness Act to combat gender-based wage discrimination and end the gender pay gap, it did so with just 1 Republican voting in favor. Reproductive health care is banned in 13 states. No Republicans voted for the Women's Health Protection Act as states passed those draconian restrictive laws criminalizing women for seeking an abortion. And childcare is increasingly expensive for 63% of families. Not one member of the majority supported investments in childcare so that every family can afford childcare and allow women to rejoin the workforce without breaking the bank. Now, this committee's majority did speak up for Title IX, but only in the context of hurting women and defending the previous administration's erosion of protections and freedom for survivors of sexual violence on college campuses. Women are not tools to obscure the hate for gender inclusivity. So let's be clear about what this bill actually does. Let's stop the attack on trans kids and do what people have elected us to do in this committee, which is fully fund public schools, keep classrooms free from gun violence, and give every kid a safe, inclusive environment in which to succeed. That is, again, why I believe we should call this bill what it is, which is the Stigmatizing Vulnerable Children Act, and I ask for my colleagues to support this amendment. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Does